Hello, my name is Amin, and I present my research on pore-scale gas-water dynamics in underground hydrogen and carbon dioxide storage. I'm a postgraduate researcher at the University of Glasgow, James Watt School of Engineering, GeoEnergy Engineering Group, led by Dr. Yu Huaijang. In our research group, we focus on subsurface storage of different type of gases, hydrogen and CO2. From pore-scale, we study which is the smallest scale in subsurface settings, up to field scale, which is the largest scale in the subsurface. In my PhD, I focused on both hydrogen storage underground and geostorage of CO2. So I can say I work in the area of gas-water flow in underground reservoirs, which is in more scientific terms a two-phase flow in porous media problem. So I'd like to talk about intermittent flow regime. So this flow regime is a specific type of flow regime in two-phase or multi-phase flowing porous media, and it occurs at relatively high velocities of injection or flow. And it's when a portion of the pore space is occupied intermittently by one of the phases. So it can be gas water or oil water or any other type of two phases. Here's the visualization from oil and water flow. So this is a 2D slice of a steady state flow of oil and brine in a rock sample. We can say that even at the steady state condition of the stable phases of oil and brine, there is an intermittent phase that occupy a portion of the pore space. And this intermittent phase can be either, in this example, oil or brine, but we cannot confidently say which phase actually occupies this portion. So that's why we call it intermittent phase, because it changes with time, or even it changes with the magnitude of velocity or flow rate in the system. So in our case, we are curious how this intermittent flow regime can impact the integrity of applications like CO2 storage underground or hydrogen storage underground. As I said, this intermittent flow regime occurs at relatively high velocities. So first, we need to define a measure like capillary number. So this capillary number is nothing but viscous force ratio to capillary force, and it's proportional to the injection of the flow rate. So the more capillary number we have, the more injection flow rates we have. So with this in mind, we designed our experiments for CO2 brine flow with synchrotron X-ray imaging that was done at Diamond Light Source, Oxfordshire, UK. So we did the CO2 experiment with imaging, so we could look into the porous structure of our rock samples. For the hydrogen brine, it was bench test in our lab at James Watt School. So we could record the pressure across the system, pressure difference across the system to analyze the data. So the first experiment, the CO2 one, in that we co-injected CO2 and brine in a limited range of flow rates at high pressure, high temperature in our carbonate rock sample. In the second experiment, hydrogen brine flow. So in this experiment, we used another sample. It was sandstone rock sample, and we used an extended range of flow rates to get more data. Also, we saw the effect of fractional flow. So we injected with different fractions or portions of the water and gas into the system. So we got a good number of data points here to analyze. So we plotted the data for the hydrogen brine flow pressure readings in terms of pressure gradient versus velocity to discuss them in more detail. So we can see all of them here in 6 subplots. So we can see that from water fractional flow of 0.2 to 0.8, and then single phase flow of water or brine, we can see different results. So FW 0.2 is when we have 20% brine in the ejection fluid and 80% gas. So in 0.8, it's the opposite. So we have 80% water and 20% gas. And there are some intermediate values in here as well. As we can see, we can observe different stages of pressure gradient versus capillary number here. So some of them, or better say, the ones in relatively very low capillary numbers, so they are Darcy flow, so it obeys Darcian flow, very similar to single phase flow. At relatively very higher capillary numbers, we also could see a stable intermittent flow that we will talk about that later as well. So why we call it stable intermittent flow. Also in between, in intermediate capillary numbers, when the relationship between pressure gradient and capillary number is a bit different, so the slope here is relatively lower, so we can call it a developing intermittent flow, which is a transitional region between Darcy flow and stable intermittent flow. If we notice for Darcy flow and stable intermittent flow in all cases, so the relationship between pressure gradient and capillary number is linear. So there is no exponent like A here. So it's linear. So and just pressure gradient is explicitly equals the capillary number. But for developing intermittent flow region, we can see that this behavior is nonlinear. So this nonlinearity can be defined as an exponent like A here, different A values for each of the co-injection cases. So what it means is that for example, for a target flow rate, target capillary number, in this case, we can see lower pressure gradients compared to when we have Darcy flow or stable intermittent flow. In other terms, we can say for a target pressure gradient, we can expect higher flow rates. So it's very important for us because higher flow rate means improved injectivity of the gas into the subsurface. So we can say this intermediate region or transitional region is a sweet spot or sweet region for us, bringing about improved injectivity in the subsurface. So the reason why we call this specific regions as Darcy flow, developing intermittent flow, and stable intermittent flow goes back to our CO2 experiments. As we can see, we observed the 3D structure of our sample for different capillary numbers. And we visualize each of the phases with different colors. Again, blue is brine, red is CO2, and yellow is the intermittent phase. So for two first cases, very low capillary numbers, we couldn't see any intermittency. So it was simply no intermittency or Darcy flow. So for three next cases, three next capillary numbers, we could see intermittency occurs and it develops with the capillary number. So we can call it developing intermittency because we see more and more intermittencies in the system. And after a threshold value, we can see the intermittency reach stability and there's no more development for that. So you could call it stable intermittency. In this slide also, we can see that we can somehow validate our experiments with the theory. We can generate our phase diagrams in terms of capillary number of each of the phases in the axis. So if we experimentally plot the capillary number of each of the phases that we could obtain and use the analytical or theoretical definition of the threshold from Darcy flow to developing intermittent flow, or generally intermittent flow, and from developing intermittent flow to stable intermittent flow. So we can see that the theoretical threshold values, the first one from Darcy to developing from the literature, and second one being proposed by ourselves, we could see an agreement between the threshold from theory and the threshold we could see uh, in our experiments. For example, for the CO2 work, the first two capillary numbers falls within Darcy flow, the next three falls in developing intermittent flow, and the remainder being in the stable intermittent flow region. So as a final remark, we can say that we can define a potential positive implication for the storage capacity of the gas to be stored, hydrogen or CO2. We could see an intermittency development region that was characterized by increasing intermittency cluster size, which is followed by a stabilization phase in which intermittent phase saturation remains roughly a constant value. So it was because of the nonlinearity that we could observe between pressure gradient and capillary number in this intermittency development region. In the literature, it was discussed that it is with some enhanced phase mobilization and enhanced connectivity of the phases. So we also could see that we can say somehow the injection is maximized based on different cases of fractional flows. We could see that the injection rate can be higher compared to Darcy flow assumption, something between 3 and 6 times. So this is the quantitative discussion of the potential positive implication for the injectivity of the gases underground we could see. Here are the references. Thank you.